Well, good morning. Welcome back to the Broadcast Retirement Network. I'm Jeff Snyder. This is BRN AM for Friday, January 21st, 2022. And our top story today, capturing a legacy, questions we may want to ask as we age. Joining me now to discuss this and a lot more, Rich Polt is the founder of Acknowledge Media. Rich, great to see you again. Thanks so much for joining us, and Happy New Year to you and your family.
Thanks. Same to you. It's great to be here again, Jeff.
It's great to talk to you. And when we last had you on, we did not do the topic enough justice, and I hope we've got a full show today. We're going to talk about the importance of preserving your legacy. And before we get into some of the questions you need to ask yourself or ask those around you, why do we want to preserve our legacy?
Well, there's different reasons for different people. Preserving our legacy for many people is a way of passing on important aspects of their life to next generations, to whether that's children, grandchildren, nieces, nephews, friends, family, community members. But it's a way of preserving who you are and taking the things that you've learned and experienced and propagating those forward. And for some, that is just as important as safeguarding your physical possessions as you would in a will. Or your finances as you would in a trust or an estate plan.
Yeah, it really is important. And I think what I want to do is ask you as a follow-up, and you have a really interesting product service that you provide where you're actually sitting down with family members, and maybe you do that virtually now, I don't know, but you ask questions. What types of questions, in order to figure out our legacy, in order to figure out whether or not we have had a life well lived, to use your terms, what are some of the questions we should be asking ourselves and each other?
So let's take a step back. That's a great question that you've asked, and I think it's important to understand the power of questions first and foremost, because we often take questions for granted. There's a great quote by Jane Goodall. And she said that it's our ability to ask questions that make us human, right? So what is it about questions, fundamentally? And think about what's going on here, just between you and me. You asking me questions, this is connecting us, right? So it's a way that we as humans connect to one another. And by extension, if we ask ourselves questions, it's a way of connecting with ourselves. It's a way of contemplation, self-love. Asking yourself a question. It tells somebody that you care about them. If I ask my parents a question about growing up, I'm not just looking for an answer. I'm conveying to them that I give a darn, that I care about that. And so there's a lot of power. And unfortunately, in this kind of this generation of screens, we're moving away from that, right? This intrinsic sense of talking to one another has become substituted with texts and emails, and we don't get that personal connection. So there's so much power here. I'm going to continue this with this idea of questions. There are very different kinds of questions that people can ask one another. I did this exercise a number of years ago where I asked a question a day for 365 days. I have them all on my website, but when I looked at all these questions, I realized that there are really different kinds of questions that we can ask one another. And there's this measure of how personal a question can be. And I think of it this scale. And on one side, you can ask a question like, well, how's the weather? It's a very impersonal question. And, so you can ask that to anyone and they'll just answer that. What time is it? On the other end, you have incredibly personal questions. What is your, do you believe in God? What are your political beliefs? Things like that. And you can't just ask somebody a question like that unless there's a lot of trust and connection already. So that being said, going back to your initial question, which is where do you start? you don't just dive in the deep end, right? You don't start, if you've never done this, by saying, how do you define a good life? What are your beliefs in God? Because that will have the opposite intended effect. If the goal is to learn and to uncover, then you want to start where it's easy to begin. I'm going to pause and maybe let you ask a question.
Yeah, it was good. You had me at with the empathy, Rich, and that is so important. You and I are the same age. We've known each other for a long time and through childhood, and I found myself asking questions to my parents. Where did our family come from? I think as I've aged, I've wanted to learn more about my origination, besides coming out of the womb, right? I mean, the family origination. And is there a sense that this is something that you do as you mature, as you age, or could someone who is a younger person, is it really just having a sense of self and whenever you achieve that?
I think a person can ask the questions at any point. One of the big things that our kids are doing these days in school are these exercises and homework where they're tasked with interviewing a grandparent, right? So you can ask the question and you have permission to ask these questions at any point in your life. I think the question is, at what point do you begin to process and really understand the answers that you're being given? When I filmed my parents a number of years ago, I did give our children the opportunity to ask some questions to my parents. And the way that my parents answered them were as how they would talk to, at that time, 7 and 10-year-olds, not how they would talk to peers. And I think the beauty of doing these recorded legacies with parents and grandparents is that for people who may not be able to understand those responses today, they can hear what their grandparents or parents are saying years in the future, when they may be able to understand and have greater empathy, to use your word, as to what's being said. When I ask somebody, about their core values, and they talk about doing the right thing, or they talk about, the golden rule, do unto others, the 10-year-old isn't going to understand that, having been there and experienced it, in the same way that an adult who has lived more and experienced more would understand it.
Yeah. Well, context, obviously important, but I think experience and getting that experience, you only get experience by doing. You don't get experience. You can't read it in a book. You can't get it any other way than actually gaining the experience. Rich, I need to take a very quick break. When we come back, we'll talk more about preserving your legacy and the tools and resources you can use to do so. You're going to want to stay tuned right here on BRN AM.
The Motley Fool helps its members invest and save with expert stock picks aimed at multiplying their net worth over time. As a member, you'll get 2 monthly stock recommendations, access to their best current and historical stocks, tracking of your favorite stocks, articles, reports, and all the expert insights you could ever ask for. The Motley Fool takes the guesswork out of investing, so you can focus on the important things in life. Join now for less than $2 a week.
Imagine a new television network that will make you richer, healthier, and in control of your financial future. This network is for the policewoman in Nashville, Tennessee, the baker in Dubuque, Iowa, the teacher in Lexington, Kentucky. We want to make the idea of savings and retirement culturally relevant. But what do you see as a defining issue of the midterms? Especially for the smaller businesses. I mean, they are the lifeblood of the American economy. Featuring exclusive interviews, current affairs, and docuseries. 33 years old, you retired early.
The philosophy is money only matters if it helps you live a life that you love.
But you got to start thinking about retirement as soon as you get in.
The Broadcast Retirement Network will drive very high engagement with premium partnerships. So this isn't retirement and savings for your parents or grandparents. This is for all Americans. And we're going to change the way you think about money. Welcome to the next frontier of retirement and savings. This is BRN, the Broadcast Retirement Network.
Are you over 50? Would you like to get up to 33% more income in retirement? Then call now for this free book, Annuity Do's and Don'ts for Baby Boomers. This free book reveals little-known secrets about annuity strategies that will help you make the right choices before buying an annuity. Call right now for your free book, and as a bonus, we'll also throw in a free annuity rate report, both absolutely free for calling Annuity General today.
Call 800-504-8194.
Welcome back. We're talking this morning to Rich Polt of Acknowledge Media. Rich, thanks so much for sticking with us this morning.
Oh, I'm glad to be here still. This is a fun conversation for me to have.
It is fun. It is fun. And I want to kind of pick up, I know I said that when we went to break that we're going to talk about tools and resources, but hey, let's push that aside a little bit. Maybe we'll get to that later on in the conversation or in another appearance on the network. But let's talk about some of these questions. And you kind of set it up real nice. Context is king. But what are some of the questions that we should be asking our loved ones?
Sure. So, in this kind of endless realm of possible questions that we can ask ourselves, there are certain questions that I think really allow a person to present or provide clues as to who they are. And you touched on one of them, which was this idea of where do I come from? And I love that question because, on the surface, we might say, oh, well, I'm from Baltimore, Maryland, right? That's kind of the simple interpretation of that question. But when you ask it in a different way, when you say, well, what makes you, you, right? Which is another way of saying, where do you come from? All of a sudden you realize there's so many other things that you can point to that help define who we are. In some respects, it's that nature-nurture conversation. Am I a product of the geography where I grew up? Am I a product of the stories of my grandparents and what comes before me, right? Like our grandparents come from different parts of the world. And do I gravitate more towards one of their stories? Does that define me? Am I a product of the friends that I grow up with? We often talk about parents lose their influence on their kids at a certain age, and then it's all about the friends they surround themselves with. Am I a product of the people who are in my community? So I love that as a starting off question.
Yeah, those are, at the heart of it. And, when I think about where I come from, I'm not thinking about I come from a mom and a dad or whatever, biologically. I'm thinking about, to your point, what country of origin, what are the cultures, what are the paradigms that family came from? What part of history was that? I think my family came here post-Civil War, so in the late 1880s or early 1900s. So all of that to me is very important context. Let me ask you a question, Rich.
Yeah.
In terms of tactically doing this, this is something that you do with a piece of paper like this or note cards, like you would be doing an interview, a school interview. Do you need a whole pack of 3x5 file cards, or do you have a tablet? How do you tactically do that?
Right. Well, so I think it's about what your goal is. If this is me, right, if this is an exercise in self-reflection, then you don't need anything. Really, it could be just like meditation. It could be sitting down and just contemplating one of these and maybe jotting down your responses. If I want to lead an interview, for an assignment or as a project, as a keepsake, then it absolutely makes sense to come in with a roadmap, write down some of those core questions, just as you would before an interview, and then be prepared to pivot and see where that conversation takes you. Do we have time to talk about a couple other quick questions?
Yeah, let's do another one. And by the way, I'm horrible with scripts, Rich. So my executive producer hates that I don't follow a script, but I like thinking off the cuff, and I like listening to what you're saying or the other person is saying and kind of reacting to that. So hit us with a couple more questions. We've got a few minutes left in the segment.
So I think another important one is this idea of what is a struggle or a challenge that I live with every day, or perhaps a struggle that I have overcome in my life. And this is a really important question to ask ourselves or to ask a loved one, because so often we want to take the easy route, particularly in these interviews, where we may be asked to reflect upon something painful. And so it's easy to take those difficult struggles and to say, we're not going to dwell on those. My grandkids aren't going to want to hear about all the miscarriages, or they're not going to want to hear about the time that I struggled professionally. These are difficult things to think about, but it's precisely why we do need to think about those, because our kids, our grandkids, we ourselves personally, we experience the greatest amount of growth through challenge and through overcoming those challenges. And when we are telling our story, we don't want people to walk away with the idea that it was always easy for us. We want people to understand that we are real humans. We are relatable people. And by seeing that we had our own struggles, then we can begin to apply the lessons learned in our own lives, right? So really important question to ask.
And I think so, because I agree with you. And I think even more so in today's world, because it's so pervasive. When you look on social media, everyone's got a perfect life. And I'm trying to figure out why I don't have a perfect life when I look on Twitter or Instagram. I don't really use those services, but I'm just playing along here.
Yeah.
We all have trials and tribulations. We all put our shoes on and our pants on one leg at a time. We all have challenges. And to your point, how you deal with that really defines you as a person. And there are different degrees of challenges, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I'm going to hit you with two more quick questions.
Yep.
In the remaining time. Number one, how do I want to be remembered? That's a really important question to ask yourself, because at any moment, it's just a snapshot in your life, right? We're not at the end of the road. We still have things ahead of us. And so when you think about what is it that I want to be remembered for, you might already be well on that journey, but maybe there are some things that you do want to do to help influence that vision for yourself down the road. How do I want to be remembered? And along those lines, another really important question, and this is one that you led with, is how do I define a life well lived? Because when you answer that question, in many ways, you are giving yourself the roadmap, right? You're saying, if this is what a good life looks like, you can say, and where am I against that? What do I want to do? What do I want to change about myself? So these are just some, very few, 4 questions that I've asked here of a litany, and there's so much value in asking these questions of ourselves and others.
Yeah, you got me thinking, and what I'd like to do is, Rich, invite you back in maybe in next month, and we pick up the conversation. I think this is so powerful, especially in today's world where things are more digitized, and our keepsakes are in a lot of ways not even on paper anymore. Rich Pult, we're going to have to leave it there. Great to see you. Thanks so much for joining us. Have a great weekend, and we'll talk to you again very soon.
Thanks, Jeff. Take care.
That wraps up this episode of BRN AM. Have a topic of interest, somebody you think we should talk to? Drop us a line, and don't forget, for all the information in lifestyle, wellness, finance, tech, so much more in all in one place, check out today's edition of our daily newsletter, The Morning Pulse. Want to search our archives or check out our latest content? Then check out our streaming partners like Amazon, Roku, Samsung, and over 100 more. We're back again tomorrow for BRN Weekly. We'll take a look at some of our best segments for the week. Until then, I'm Jeff Snyder. Stay safe, keep on saving, and don't forget, roll with the changes. Now is your opportunity to co-create content around any topic on the first lifestyle and wellness network. Reach a global audience through our platform and co-own exclusive branded content. All of our programs are available on demand and also as audio-only podcasts, so you can take us on the go. Broadcast Retirement Network, available anytime, anywhere, and on any device.
Are you being audited and do you owe the IRS $10,000 or more in back taxes? Is the IRS threatening to take more of your money? Don't fight the IRS alone. The Tax Doctor is here to help you negotiate your tax bill and reduce your stress. The IRS can freeze your assets and seize your bank accounts, but you can stop these IRS actions. The Tax Doctor will work with you using our years of experience to represent your case to help you get the best resolution under the IRS guidelines. Help is here to deal with the IRS to reduce your stress. We've handled thousands of cases, so we know what we're doing. If you owe $10,000 or more in back taxes, do not call the IRS alone. Call a Tax Doctor now for a tax emergency analysis.
Call 800-224-6439.